evening and welcome to Lourly Online. Hope y'all are having a great week. Man, I was looking at the weather forecast and it does look like we probably might have some good weather for the weekend for Sunday. So again, as long as that weather holds up, as long as it doesn't look like we're going to have rain, I'll be fully intending on having Lourly on the lot again. But anyhow, if you have any prayer requests, scroll straight down. Drop them right there at the on the website. There's a place for prayer requests. You can go ahead and drop those there. I did get an update on Miss Jean. The last update that I've got is that she is feeling better, and they were going to do COVID-19 tests as a precautionary measure just to make sure she is clear from that. And then possibly releasing her. But continue to have her in her prayers. And if you do have any other updates on her, please shoot me a message. Let me know. But anyhow, if you have any other prayer requests, go ahead and drop those in that prayer request box so we can be praying for them. Also, at any time, you can either send a message to church through Facebook or in the private group. Go ahead and put your prayer requests there. But anyhow, it is great to have y'all tonight. Couple of announcements. So the 14th, Thursday the 14th, we are going to be having Hope for the Hungry. Hope for the Hungry will be here, and they will be here, and they will also be at North Somerville Baptist Church doing drive-in Hope for the Hungry type thing. I'm going to need some volunteers that day. We're looking to have a lot of folks coming through. If you listen to WZQZ, we've had a radio ad on broadcasting that. So the reach that we're going to have out, I think Hope for the Hungry is actually going to get a ad in the newspaper, and also we're going to look to Hope for the Hungry is also going to do a paid Facebook ad as well to get as many people out hearing about it as possible. So that's going to be awesome. Hopefully we're going to be able to put the gospel out to a lot more people than what we typically have. Because even though it is a drive-through service, even though we're not doing the one-on-one counseling, we're still going to be giving them the gospel. We're still going to be ministering in that way. But yeah. So a lot of people also have been kind of asking, hey, have we put any thought about when we're going to get back together, when we're going to start back up, when we're going to actually start having church again? And I have put a lot of thoughts, a lot of prayers to it. Right now, I'm meeting with some people, and we are discussing exactly how we're going to do that. I will go ahead and say that we will be doing this. The earliest that we're going to be meeting back is going to be the 17th of May. That will be the absolute earliest. And again, that's very, very tentative. I want to watch this thing for the next couple of weeks to see what it's going to do. And if it keeps this downhill trend, we may try to start phasing back in full service, full everything. And something else is we're not going to jump straight back into doing everything like we had been doing it before. Like I said, we're going to phase things back in, just as kind of the government's phasing back into opening. We're going to phase back in things as well. I feel like I definitely want on Sunday mornings to meet in person, but I feel like our Wednesday nights and our Sunday nights programs have been relatively strong doing them in this manner. And even when we get back, I'm going to try to incorporate some of the things that I've been doing on Wednesdays and Sunday nights that I've really been able to enjoy. I'm going to try to figure out a way to incorporate those into my regular teaching. I just got to figure out exactly how. I'm definitely not going to be, when we go back, I'm definitely not going to be back here in my office trying to teach y'all. But I'm going to be trying to use some of the multimedia type things I've been able to use recently that I've really been able to enjoy, because I really think that adds a lot to the lesson. It gets a lot more about the lesson out there. But anyhow, speaking of, we're going to jump right in tonight. And we're going to do something different. I know that the live thing said we're going to do the marriage thing again, but actually, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to piggyback my sermon series the sermon series a little bit. The sermon series has been a man after God's own heart, and we're talking about David. And there's so much about David, and so many little things. And like I said, we could be here until Jesus comes back if I did a sermon on everything about David. And so what we're going to do is, and then there's a lot of things going through this series. There's been a lot of times where I've been going, man, I wish I would have done this as a Sunday night thing, as a verse by verse type deal, like I'm doing with the book of Acts. But then I get to other parts of it and go, no, this is such a great sermon. So what I may do while I'm going through the series is just like what we're doing tonight. So I preached in chapter 20 Sunday. Next Sunday, we're going to be in chapter 24. And so tonight, we're going to hit the events of chapter 21, 22, and 23. Of what kind of happened there. It's awesome events. It's stuff that needs to be touched on. It's just and there are definitely sermons in there for sure, but they lend themselves better to more of unpacking type teaching series than going through and doing 6 or 7 sermons out of these passages. But anyhow, before we do anything, we're going to open up in prayer. So join me in prayer. Lord, we come before you right now. I just want to thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for everybody who is watching, everybody who is joining with us. And God, I know that everybody wants to be here. Everybody wants to be in person. And God, we know that the day is coming. And God, just give me wisdom as figuring this thing out. Your word says that if anybody lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives it freely and without reproach. And God, I pray for me and for the rest of the leadership, God, you give us wisdom during this time. Right now, I just pray for anybody who has prayer requests, anybody who has unspoken requests. God, I just want to lift them up to you. God, you know the heart, you know every need, and you know how to touch each need in a special way. And God, right now, I just pray that as we open your word and we learn from your word in these 3 chapters of the Bible, God, I pray that you'll make it come to life. And God, just again, thank you so much for everything that you have done to and through us. You're a good God and a great God. We love you in Christ's name. Amen. And so I'm going to try to jump right into this because we've got a lot. Okay. So anybody who really kind of knows me knows that I'm not a great reader. I tend to struggle sometimes reading, especially when I'm reading a lot. And so what we're going to do tonight, being that I am at my desk and I can do this, we're actually going to, well, you'll see. Check it out. I'm going to switch screens real quick. And so if you want to follow along, this is going to be 1 Samuel chapter 21, and we're going to do that. So
told David,
"Look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah, and they are robbing the threshing floors."
Therefore David inquired of the Lord.
And that is the wrong chapter. That's the wrong chapter. Hold on, let me get the right chapter. Chapter 21. Here we go. Sorry about that.
Now David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. And Ahimelech was afraid when he met David, and said to him,
"Why are you alone, and no one is with you?"
"The king has ordered me on some business, and said to me, 'Do not let anyone know anything about the business on which I send you, or what I have commanded you. and I have directed my young men to such and such a place. Now, therefore, what have you on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or whatever can be found.
There is no common bread on.
So, just a little background of what has happened right before all of this. Right, what has happened right before all of this is that this is when Saul has once again tried to kill David, and David is fleeing. David is going into exile. David and Jonathan just found out for sure that yes, Saul's going to kill you, and now David's like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go. And so David, this is like the first steps of David going into exile. The first place he goes is a city called Nob. But anyhow, we're going to go back over here and we're going to read the rest of this.
Hand. But there is holy bread, no common bread on hand. But there is holy bread, if the young men have at least kept themselves from women.
Truly, women have been kept from us about 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in effect common, even though it was consecrated in the vessel this day.
So the priest gave him holy bread, for there was no bread there, but the showbread, which had been taken from before the Lord, in order to put hot bread in its place on the day when it was taken away.
I totally hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. So what's going on here is David is fleeing from Saul. David's going into exile. He goes to a city called Nob, and he comes to the priest there, and he needs something to eat. He's hungry. He needs something to eat. His men need something to eat. And he says, hey, listen, do you have any food here? What do you have on hand? And the priest says, we don't have anything on hand except for the ceremonial showbread that's there on the table in the temple. And the priest gives him this bread. Trying to make sure my phone wasn't bad. I heard some other noise. I don't know what it is. I know what it is. I see it right here. So the priest gives him this other bread, and this is interesting because this is something that Jesus brings up. So if you want to, I'm going to read from Matthew. And I thought I had it underlined. I guess I don't. Oh, yeah, I do. Matthew chapter 12, starting in verse 1, it says, at that time Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry and began to pluck the heads of grain to eat. When the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath. But he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of the God and ate the showbread, which is not lawful for him to eat, for those who were with him, but only for the priest? Or have you not read the law that on the Sabbath the priest in the temple profane the Sabbath are blameless? Yet I say unto you that this place there is one greater than the temple. But had you known what that means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is even the Lord of the Sabbath. And then he goes on, later on, and again he heals on the Sabbath. And in verse 11 he says, what man is there among you who has one sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, would not lay hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more then value is a man than sheep? Therefore is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So Jesus here says that what David has done is unlawful. And so to explain this, so what happens is that in the temple, they offer bread to God, and they bring the bread in, and they bring it in warm, and they nice and toasty and warm, and they put it on this table, and that's an offering for God. It's a sacrifice to God. And the way that it works is that while it's warm and it's nice and it's toasty and it's delicious, it's there for God. But once it's been there a couple of days, and now it's kind of getting stale, it's cold, it's called showbread. And when it gets replaced, they can take the showbread, and now the priest, and according to the law of Moses, only the priest can eat it. And so what happens is David comes rolling in, and he's hungry. David needs something to eat, and there's nothing there. And so they kind of David and these priests start looking at the showbread going, technically it's just for the priest, but maybe me as the priest, I can take it and then give it to you, which really he can't do. According to the letter of the law, he can't do that. According to the letter of the law, here the priest and David are breaking the rules. That bread is just for the priest. Okay? And David comes in, and David and his men eat this bread. And it's interesting that Jesus brings this up. Jesus brings this up whenever he is questioned about the Sabbath and about keeping the Sabbath and some of the things that he was doing on the Sabbath. And Jesus brings this up and pretty much saying, David's hungry. David's starving. And yes, by the letter of the law, he's not supposed to eat this. But this again shows that things like the Sabbath, and Jesus says later on that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And that some of these things that are letters of the law here, especially for David, and yes, he breaks the law, but almost what Jesus is saying here is that there needs to be a level of common sense that goes along with keeping the law. And take for instance me. I don't consider Sunday my Sabbath day. I'm a pastor. Sunday is like my biggest work day. And so Saturday ends up being my Sabbath. And that's why, most Saturdays I take, me and the family, we load up and we go off-roading, or we go camping, or we go hiking, or we do something together as a family that is fun, it's relaxing, we get family time, we try to spend time with God, and we keep that time as a day of rest. That's my Sabbath. That's my day of rest. Because Sunday's definitely not. It's a work day for me. And so again, it is the Sabbath being, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And again, like orders like baptism, we're Baptists. We believe in dunking. We believe in full immersion baptism. However, that's not always feasible. And whereas I believe in full immersion baptism, sometimes it's not feasible to dunk somebody. And so we've got to have here, just like what Jesus said, there has to be a common sense approach to much of these things. To much of these things, there has to be a common sense approach to how we do them. And again, here David comes in here. He's hungry. He's starving. What do you have on hand to eat? Only the showbread. Jesus brings this up later as a defense for his disciples plucking grain and eating it on the Sabbath. So let's continue in reading or having this read to us.
The herdsman who belonged to Saul. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. And his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chief of the herdsmen who belonged to Saul. And David said to Ahimelech,
Is there not here on hand a spear or a sword? For I have brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste.
The sword of Goliath the Philistine. whom you killed in the valley of Elah. There it is, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it. For there is no other except that one here.
There is none like it. Give it to me.
All right, so here, first thing that I want to point out here is that David lies to the priest. David is fleeing from Saul. David is going into exile, and the first thing that he tells the priest is, hey, I'm on this super secret squirrel mission from Saul, and nobody knows about it, and it's super hasty, and the king's business was so hasty that I didn't bring a sword or a shield with me, and we're on a special mission from Saul, and that was a lie. That was an absolute bald-faced lie, and as we're going to see, there's consequences for this. There's severe consequences for this, for David lying to this priest. And you're going to see that it hits David kind of hard as well. And then also something else that we see here that's kind of cool is that David, he says, hey, I need a weapon. I didn't bring any of my weapons with me. I need a weapon. Is there a sword? Is there a spear? Is there, brass knuckles? Is there anything here that I can use as a weapon? And the priest says, yeah, the sword of Goliath is here. And David's like, cool, I'll take it. And so he takes the sword of Goliath. And as far as we know, that's kind of what he wields here on out, is this giant, and then how cool is that? Is that David, like this normal sized dude, is wielding like a giant sized sword, like, oh, I think that's kind of cool. So David takes Goliath's sized sword, and then he continues his exile. And I don't know why he goes to this next place, but he goes to the next place. So let's continue on and let's see where David goes.
Then David arose and fled that day from before Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath.
All right, so he goes to Gath, and I don't know what possessed David to go to Gath. First off, Gath is a Philistine city, a Philistine little city-state. David has not won any popularity contest in Philistine. And not only, it's not just any Philistine city. This is the hometown of I swear I hear something. Is this? Okay, that's what it was. Yeah. My phone, I did have a little volume up on my phone. I'm monitoring it on my phone, and I'm like, I hear something. And that's what it was. My volume was just barely up on my phone where I could hear it. So David goes to... Gath wasn't just any Philistine city. Gath is the hometown of Goliath. This is where Goliath was like born and raised. This is where Goliath was from. And not only was Goliath from here, all of Goliath's family, like his giant family, his family of giants is also from Gath. And I don't know what David is thinking here. I don't know if maybe David is like, hey, the last place Saul's going to look for me is in Gath, which that's probably true. But he goes, and instead of trying to blend in, which he wouldn't have, because as we talked about, the Philistines are Greek. They come from the island of Crete, and so they are Greek looking. They are Greek culture, and David's going to stand out like a sore thumb. Here is this, around a bunch of people that are Greek looking, and here is David, who is a ginger. When the Bible says that he was ruddy in appearance, that means he was redheaded. He was a ginger. And so he's going to stand out like a sore thumb out here anyhow. And so he flees to Gath, And I don't know what I don't know. Some commentaries say that he was going to offer his services possibly as a mercenary. Some say that he was going to have tried to say we have a mutual enemy in Saul. I don't know why David decided to go to Gath of all places, but this is what happens when he does.
Servants of Achish said to him,
"Is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing of him to one another in dances, saying, 'Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s'?"
Ruh-roh. So here's that song again. You ever hear a song and like the first time you hear it, it's kind of like, hey, that's kind of catchy, all right. But then it gets played over and over and over again. You're like, oh, I can't stand this song. I'm sure this how this tens of thousands songs was get. This song has done nothing but cause David problems. It caused David problems with Saul, and now here it's all the way in Gath, and they're like, hey, isn't this David that Saul killed his thousands and David killed his 10,000s? This is the guy, right? And those tens of thousands, those were Philistines. Those were us. So this goes south for David very, very fast. So let's see what happens next.
Now David took these words to heart,
I bet so.
and was very much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them, pretended madness in their hands, scratched on the doors of the gate, and let his saliva fall down on his beard.
So David pretends he's going crazy. Like David goes and scratches at the door and drools all in his beard and pretend like they're bringing him before the king of Gath, and he acts like he's off his rocker. He acts like he's losing his mind, and anyhow, that's funny. Let's continue on.
Then Achish said to his servants,
"Look, you see the man is insane. Why have you brought him to me? Have I need of madmen that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?"
It worked. It worked. So David pretends he's crazy. The king of Gath goes, "Why have you brought this lunatic into my court? He's clearly mad." "Oh, but he says he's King David." "Oh, I'm sure he says he's King David." Next, he's going to say he's Goliath. Next, he's going to say he's whoever. He's Pharaoh. Get him out of here. He's crazy. He's off his rocker. Why have y'all brought him here? It works. So for some reason, David decides to go to Gath. We don't know what David was thinking. It starts going south quick because they know who he is. They start singing the little song that they were singing back in Israel. And in Israel, it's like, oh, David's the conquering hero. Well, when you're talking about the tens of thousands, those are tens of thousands of Philistines he's done killed. And in here, that's a lot worse. Because this is the thing. On our side of all this, David is the hero. So on our side of David and Goliath, David is the conquering hero. And Gath, David was public enemy number one. He killed their hometown hero. And so this goes south for David really fast. And David pretty much pulls this Hail Mary and starts pretending he's crazy to see if he can, and it works. And God protects David. God keeps David from being taken captive, because this could have worked out any other way. I mean, this king could have killed David himself. This king could have captured David. I mean, what better, if you want to pull a deal with King Saul, what better pawn than the person that he hates most of all? It's like, hey, I'll call David, and if you want David back, we're going to need this, this, and this. This could have played in his advantage, but God protected David in this, even through David. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know why he would go to Gath, but God protected him, and even what was probably a very poor decision on his part. So let's jump over to chapter 22. Get that full screen, and we'll skip over there. So let's see what chapter 22 has to say.
David therefore departed from there, and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to him. So he became captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him. Then David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. And he said to the king of Moab,
Please, let my father and mother come here with you, till I know what God will do for me.
So he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Now the prophet Gad said to David,
Do not stay in the stronghold. Depart, and go to the land of Judah.
So David departed, and went into the forest of Hereth.
So here David leaves Gath, he leaves Philistine, he goes across over to Moab. He goes into another kind of enemy-ish nation of Israel, and he goes to the king of Moab, and here he says, hey, take care of my father and my mother until all this blows over. And he may have even kind of had this kind of agreement with him, says, listen, I'm going to be the king, I'm next in line, and so this time it works out. It didn't work out that great in the Philistine camp with the Philistines, but it works out with the Moabites, where he's able to kind of keep his mother and father safe. But he goes he goes out into this wilderness, and something kind of cool happens. Is it's kind of almost like this Robin Hood thing happens of everybody that's in Judah and Israel, or Israel at the time, that hears about this, who is in debt, who's kind of the underbelly of society. It says that was in distress. Everybody who was discontented, they came and they gathered together. And so here's David, like the king of the underdogs, right? Because, he was the ultimate underdog fighting Goliath. And here's David, the king of the underdogs, and he has like all of these underdogs that are coming and gathering together. And it's like, this whole band of, the original band of misfits of his 400 men. And, these aren't noble soldiers. These are like his brothers, and the brothers that were so hard on him before, and just the misfits of Israel are banding together and coming and fighting alongside David. And these are his about 400 men. All right, so let's find out what happens to those priests. And you see in the big letters what happens to them.
When Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered, now Saul was staying in Gibeah, under a tamarisk tree in Ramah, with his spear in his hand, and all his servants standing about him. Then Saul said to his servants who stood about him,
Hear now, you Benjamites. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? All of you have conspired against me, and there is no one who reveals to me that my son has made a covenant with the son of Jesse. And there is not one of you who is sorry for me, or reveals to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as it is this day.
So Saul, here he is, and he's with his men, and He's got a spear in his hand, and so we know what Saul likes to do when he's got a spear in his hand. It's, at any point, he might chunk the spear at somebody. And he starts telling his men, he's like, all of y'all have conspired with David, and all of y'all hate me, and don't any of you feel sorry for me. And he's just putting this whole guilt trip on all of his men, and then starts bringing up Jonathan. And Jonathan's conspiring, my son, yada, yada, yada. All right, so that's kind of what, and then of course he's got the spear in his hand, and so I'm sure all of his men are like, oh man, what's Saul got to do next? Dude's a loose cannon. So let's see what happens.
Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who was set over the servants of Saul.
I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine.
So we remember last chapter when David went to Nob and he ate the bread and he got the sword of Goliath. There was that one verse stuck in there that said that Doeg the Edomite was there, and so this is when he comes clean to Saul and says, "Hey, I saw David." With these priests from the last chapter.
So the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were in Nob. And they all came to the king. And Saul said,
Hear now, son of Ahitub.
Here I am, my lord.
Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait, as it is this day?
And who among all your servants is as faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, who goes at your bidding and is honorable in your house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. Let not the king impute anything to his servant or to any in the house of my father. For your servant knew nothing of all this, little or much.
You shall surely die, Ahimelech. You and all your father's house.
Then the king said to the guards who stood about him,
Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not tell it to me.
But the servants of the king would not lift their hands to strike the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg,
You, turn and kill the priests!
So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck the priests, and killed on that day 85 men who wore a linen ephod. Also Nob, the city of the priests, he struck with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and nursing infants, oxen and donkeys and sheep, with the edge of the sword.
So, like I told you, David lied to this priest. And David told this priest, when he showed up in Nob, he said, I'm on business of the king. And this priest believed that. And so when Saul came and started accusing him of helping David and helping David to conspire against Saul, the priest was like, hey, I didn't know anything about this. And he was telling the truth. And who's to say that the priest wouldn't have helped David anyhow and gotten killed anyhow? But here the priest gets killed for he had no clue what he was doing, and he got killed for this. And so and then here on the other hand, this is Saul commanding the slaughter of God's priests. And so we see Saul, this slope, this how Saul is going down and worse and worse and worse and worse. And Saul gives a commandment to his men to kill these priests. And his men were like, yeah, no, there ain't no way. I'm not raising my hand against a priest of God. There's no way. And so then he turned to Doeg, and the one that ratted David out to begin with, and says, okay, you do it. Well, Doeg was there, and Doeg knew what David had told them. And so if anybody should have spoke up and said, hey, listen, David lied to these guys, and these guys really thought that they were doing the right thing, it should have been Doeg. But instead, Doeg commits this huge atrocity against God's priests and everything. So very, very tragic. So let's continue on in verse 20.
Now one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the Lord's priests. So David said to Abiathar,
I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me. Do not fear. For he who seeks my life seeks your life, but with me you shall be safe.
So David here realizes that he caused the death of all these priests. And this one guy escapes, and he chases David down. He lets him know what happens. And David pretty much recruits him and said he repents. He says, listen, I caused this. It was me. I lied to him. I caused this. And I've got nothing to say. But listen, if you stay with me, I'll keep you safe. Because the one that's seeking after me, seeking to kill me, he seeks to kill you too. So stay with me, and we'll mutually benefit each other, and we'll keep each other safe. And kind of the lesson of this is those little sins that we think are okay, those little sins that we go, this doesn't hurt anything. David's coming here to these priests and going, this little white lie is not going to hurt anything. But then this little white lie gets 85 men, 85 priests were killed, and a whole city was killed because of a little white lie that's not going to hurt anything. And so we've got to be careful with those little white lies or little, the little things that we think aren't going to hurt anything. They could. And so be very careful with that. I'll always say that despite everything, and it's so much easier just to tell the truth, it's so much easier just to do the right thing than it is just to do that little white lie or this little sin that's going to make things more convenient for me. Just do the right thing. Who knows? Had David went to this priest and said, listen, Saul's crazy, and he's trying to kill me, and I got to get out of here, but I'm hungry. Can you help me out? You know how faithful I am to God. You know me. Can you help me out? Who knows what the servant might have done? Who knows what this priest might have done? The priest might have went and told Saul. Well, someone told Saul anyhow, or this priest might have helped David out, and everything would have turned out the same way, except the priest would have known what he was doing. Who knows? But it comes down to this priest dying, doing something that he didn't know at all what he was doing. And so be very, very careful. I think David learns a lesson here, and we should learn this lesson from David as well. Well, let's jump over to chapter 23, the one I tried to start playing earlier, and let's see what continues to happen. And let's go back to the start.
Then they told David,
Look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah, and they are robbing the threshing floors.
Therefore,
So whenever the threshing floors, what that means is whenever you are preparing grain, one of the last part, it's a process of harvesting and preparing grain. And one of the last things that you do is you send it to these barns, and it's called the threshing floor, where it gets threshed. And this is the last step. And so basically what the Philistines are doing, they're coming in and they're stealing the grain into the finished product. And so they're not just stealing grain, they're stealing finished grain that people have put a lot of work into. And it's going to significantly hurt the food source of the city and the farming. And so this is a walled city, this is a fortified city, and so the strategy is if we can deplete their food, we can rob their food sources, and then we can get them walled up, and then we can starve them out of the city and take the city. We can lay siege to the city. And that's kind of the plan that it appears like the Philistines have at this point.
For David inquired of the Lord,
Shall I go and attack these Philistines?
Go and attack the Philistines and save Keilah.
But David's men said to him,
Look, we are afraid here in Judah. How much more then if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines?
Then David inquired of the Lord once again. And the Lord answered him,
Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into your hand.
And David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines, and struck them with a mighty blow, and took away their livestock. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. Now it happened, when Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David at Keilah, that he went down with an ephod in his hand. And Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah. So Saul said,
God has delivered him into my hand, for he has shut himself in by entering a town that has gates and bars.
Then Saul called all the people together for war, to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men.
So David finds out that the city Keilah, or however you say it. This is the beautiful thing about having like the audio book, is all these names it pronounces them for you. David finds out the city's under attack. He goes, and first thing what's so important is that he inquires from God, God, should I go down there and save the city? And God says, yes, go save the city. And his men are like, David, no. I mean, we're hiding out in Moabite. We can't go back to Judah because then Saul can get us. David, this is a bad idea. And David seeks God again, and God's like, yes, go down and do this. I know it seems like a bad idea, but this is what I want you to do. And I take hold of this because as a leader, and God lays stuff on my heart, and people go, Trace, this is a bad idea. This is a bad idea. God's laid stuff on my heart. This is the direction that God is telling me to go. Am I going to be disobedient to God? Or are we as a church going to be disobedient to God? And David inquires of God, God, should I go and do this? God says, yes, go do this. And then his people, his men are like, David, no. And God asks him again, David asks God again, God, should I go do this? And God's, yes, David, go and do this. Go save the city. And they go do it. And David's men go and do it. And they have a mighty, mighty victory. And they win this battle. They save the city. But the side product of this is that Saul finds out. And then Saul goes, like I said before, this is a walled city. This is a fortified city. And the way it's described here is there's only one way in and one way out. And Saul says, hey, David has trapped himself. David has cornered himself. And now I got him. I got him. And so let's see what happens.
When David knew that Saul plotted evil against him, he said to Abiathar the priest,
"Bring the ephod here. O Lord, God of Israel, your servant has certainly heard that Saul seeks to come to Keilah, to destroy the city for my sake. Will the men of Keilah deliver me into his hand? Will Saul come down, as your servant has heard? O Lord God of Israel, I pray, tell your servant."
He will come down.
Will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul?
They will deliver you.
So David goes and seeks God out, seeks counsel from God again, and he says, "Hey, I've heard that Saul's on the way down here to get me. Is that true?" And God's like, "Yes, it is true." And so now David has two options. This is a walled city, and if the people of this walled city are willing to stick it out with me, I can probably stay in here. We can stay in here. We've got plenty of grain. We've got plenty of food. Saul can lay siege to his own city. He's not going to destroy his own city. This is a city in Judah. This is one of his own cities, and Saul is coming here to lay siege to the city. And so David and Bart are thinking, if the people of this city are truly with me, I can probably stay here and be all right, because it is a walled city. Saul's probably, not going to actually attack his own city. But however, if the people of the city are going to turn me over to Saul, then I can't stay here. And it's hard to tell. I mean, on one hand, I just saved them. I just came in and rescued this entire city from the Philistines and saved their grain stores. So on one hand, I can totally see how they're like, "Hey, David's a conquering hero. We're not turning him over to anybody." But on the other hand, when Saul comes with all these people threatening to burn the city down, threatening to lay siege on the whole city, I can also say to them, saying, "Listen, Dave, we appreciate what you did for us, but we got to look out for us. We didn't." So David is going, I can see this going either way. And again, another life lesson. There are times when you're having to make a decision and you look at both sides of this and you're going, "Man, I could see this going either way. I could really see this going either way, and what do I do?" And so David is here in a situation where I can see this going either way. I can see them hunkering down with me because I just saved them from the Philistines. Or I also see them turn me over to Saul. And I really don't know how this is going to go. Let me ask wisdom of God. Let me ask God, how is this going to go? God, what's going to happen? And God tells us, they're going to turn you over. So it's time for you to go. It's time for you to get up out of there. And so we'll see that that's exactly what David does.
So David and his men, about 600, arose and departed from Keilah, and went wherever they could go. Then it was told Saul that David had escaped from Keilah, so he halted the expedition, and David stayed in strongholds in the wilderness, and remained in the mountains in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul sought him every day, but God did not deliver him into his hand. So David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph, in a forest. Then Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David in the woods, and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him,
"Do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Even my father Saul knows that."
So the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. And David stayed in the woods, and Jonathan went to his own house.
So Saul's looking everywhere for David. Saul can't find David, but somehow Jonathan goes right to him. Somehow Jonathan knows exactly where David is. we don't know how Jonathan figures out where David is, but Jonathan goes right to David, and maybe it's because their souls are knit together, as it says in the scriptures, that he was able to find him. Maybe David was communicating with Jonathan somehow, letting him know where he was at, what's going on. So Jonathan goes back out to David, and it says that he was strengthened his hand in God, and just during this hard time, Jonathan was encouragement. Jonathan helped David out, encouraged him, gave him some encouraging words. Do not fear, for the hand of my father shall not find you. You shall be king of Israel, and I'll be next to you. Maybe my father knows that. And then, something that strikes me about David and Jonathan is they make another covenant. This is like the third or fourth time that these two have made covenants together. Again, and so what that tells me is they're ultimately making the same covenant, but they are reminding each other of that covenant. They are reminding David is reminding Jonathan, listen, I'm going to take care of you and your descendants. And Jonathan is reminding David, I'm not going to turn you over to my father. And so what that tells me is that sometimes the people that we make covenants with, we need to remind them of that covenant in different ways. We need to remind our spouse that you are mine, and I am yours, and nothing's going to change that, and I will be faithful to you and be with you for forever, for the rest of our lives. To renew that covenant, not necessarily renewing the vows, but just reminding that spouse that covenant is still there, that covenant is still strong, and that. So let's continue and see what happens next.
Then the Ziphites came up to Saul at Gibeah.
Is David not hiding with us in strongholds in the woods, in the hill of Hachilah, which is on the south of Jeshimon? Now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of your soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver him into the king's hand.
Blessed are you of the Lord, for you have compassion on me. Please go and find out for sure, and see the place where his hideout is, and who has seen him there. For I am told he is very crafty. See, therefore, and take knowledge of all the lurking places where he hides, and come back to me with certainty, and I will go with you. And it shall be, if he is in the land...
He says, I have heard that he is very crafty. In the next chapter, he finds out just how crafty David is.
That I will search for him throughout all the clans of Judah.
So they arose and went to Ziph before Saul. But David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the plain on the south of Jeshimon. When Saul and his men went to seek him, they told David. Therefore he went down to the rock, and stayed in the wilderness of Maon. And when Saul heard that, he pursued David in the wilderness of Maon. Then Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. So David made haste to get away from Saul, for Saul and his men were encircling David and his men to take them.
So here David and his men are as good as caught. Saul's been pursuing him. They come to the mountain. David goes around one side of the mountain. Saul goes around the other side of the mountain. Now Saul is encircling him, and David is as good as caught. Saul is about to get David, and let's see what happens.
But a messenger came to Saul.
Hurry and come, for the Philistines have invaded the land.
Therefore Saul returned from pursuing David, and went against the Philistines. So they called that place the Rock of Escape. Then David went up from there, and dwelt in strongholds at En-Gedi.
Almost had him. Saul almost had David, and he encircles him. He's closing in on him, and right at the last moment, now the Philistines are attacking, or they're invading, and Saul has his whole army here chasing David, and in the meantime, the rest of the nation is vulnerable from attack from the Philistines. And so if there's going to be a nation to rule over, when he is done, he's got to leave and he's got to go protect his nation. So he has to leave. He almost has David, and he knows there's going to probably be a battle. He's assuming David has men, and he's assuming there's going to be a battle. So he's got to go and run off the Philistines. And so God uses the Philistines to win this battle, or to save David once again. It's amazing how God works. It's amazing how God can use the enemy of God to bring about his will to protect David. And I'm sure that people that were in the cities where the Philistines were sieging them were going, God, why are you letting this happen? And little did they know that the reason God's letting this happen is to save David. Is to save David and his men. It says, yes, here things aren't going good, but they're not going good for a reason, because I got to save the future king of this nation. I've got a plan and a purpose for this guy, and I've got to save him, and so this is how I'm going to save him. And yes, it's going to be hard right now, and yes, the Philistines are going to come in and they're going to attack for a little while, but this is what has to happen, and Saul's going to come and run them off, and this is how I'm going to save David. And so something else to keep in mind, that whenever you're going through hard times, that God says that the Word of God says that God works all things together for good for those who love and trust Him. And sometimes when God's working something together for good over here, it might not be that great here, but God's working it all together for good for all of us, for those who love and trust Him. And here is the same thing. Yes, it's for this part of Israel, it's bad because the Philistines are here, but the future king is here, and he needs to be rescued. He needs Saul to get to come over here, and for the future of the nation, this is what's best, and this is how God is working all things together for good. And it's kind of a neat thing about. But anyhow, we're going to Sunday, we're going to pick up in chapter 24, and that's where we're going to be picking up in the next chapter of this, and what happens after that. But anyhow, I hope y'all learned something tonight. Like I said, this could have been 6 sermons, and we'll be preaching about David until forever. But we might do this from time to time on Wednesdays to kind of fill in the gaps between 2 Sundays, if there's quite a bit that happened between last Sunday and this Sunday coming up. But anyhow, join me in prayer. Lord, we come before you right now. I just want to thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything that you have done to and through us. Thank you so much for people who will take the time and the effort to make audio Bibles and to voice talents and hire, and do that. That's so cool. And just God, thank you for them. Thank you for laying that on their heart so that we can do lessons like this and kind of mix things up a little bit, and it's not just me as a talking head the whole time. God, just right now, I just want to pray for each member of our church, each person that is a regular, either that regularly watches us or attends. And God, just thank you so much for them. Right now, I pray a special blessing on each one. God, you're a good God and a great God. God, I just pray that your hand will be on everybody that's on the prayer list. God, again, I want to go ahead and be praying for those who might be coming out for Hope for the Hungry. God, I pray that we reach people that we've never reached before. God, you're a good God and a great God. We love you. We give you all the honor, glory, and praise. In Christ's name, amen. Just real quick, a couple other really quick announcements. Again, if you want to give, you can. Now we have 3 ways that you can give. I'll make sure I was holding 3 fingers. Sometimes I don't. 3 ways you can give now. First and the easiest way that you can give, you can scroll to the top of the website, and in the corner there it says give. Click on that and give online. The next way is you can mail your tithes and offerings to. 135, P.O. Box 135, Lowerly, Georgia 30730. And also now we do have the drop box available, and that is in between it's next to the Memorial Walk there outside. So if you want to drop your tithes and offerings into the lot box, it gets checked every single day. And it is secure. It's concreted and carriage bolted in, so it's not going anywhere. If you want to drop, I wasn't going to kind of announce it to the whole world, but I'm confident in it's not going anywhere. So if you want to put it in the Dropbox, you can put it in the Dropbox there at the church. It gets checked every day, and we'll get it in there. But anyhow, love y'all. Hope y'all are having a great week, and continue being safe, continue social distancing. This will get over. This too will pass. We'll be back together. Things will be back to normal. And, we're going to go back and we're going to hit it even harder and start trying to really make an impact for the kingdom of God. And which we should be doing now, but even more so whenever all this is said and done. Love y'all. Good night.